the election observers also accused the Electoral Umpire of not putting its house in order as regards to early distribution of voters' material, which actually delayed the election process, as some said started at 10 a.m. while some started at 12 p.m. So I'm wondering, why does INEC always have that lateness every election? That's like a recurring complaint that you always get from the Electoral Umpire. Why do you always have that complaint?
No, I've told you the trajectory of the distribution of election materials. Every non-sensitive election material moves sometimes 2 weeks, 3 weeks before any election, in terms of ballot boxes, in terms of cubicles, and also in terms of the other materials that are not really fundamental to the conduct of an election, that are not sensitive. These materials are already in the local governments. We deploy them to the local governments at least 2 weeks before any election. In terms of the sensitive election materials, the beavers, the ballot papers, and the result sheets, they leave the central bank on Thursday under heavy security. They go to the INEC state office or FCT office. Then from there, they move to the local governments, our offices in the local governments, the same Thursday.
Now we will begin today's conversation taking our popular quote from Beth Broderick, an American actress. She once said that, "I love voting day. I love the sight of my fellow citizens lining up to make their voices heard." Okay, everyone would agree, I guess. All right, so let's take our second quote, and this one is from George Jean Nathan. He is an American drama critic and magazine editor. He once said that bad officials are elected by good citizens who don't vote. Absolutely spot on. Now let's take our last quote today, and this one is from Abraham Lincoln, an American lawyer and statesman who served as the 16th president of the United States from 1861 until his assassination in 1865. He once said that the ballot is stronger than the bullet. You would agree with me. Warm greetings and welcome to The Conversation. We are reaching you from Kaftan's television studio here in the nation's capital, Abuja. I am Annabelle Oji. Now, residents of Abuja on Saturday elected chairman and councillors for the 6 area councils of the Federal Capital Territory here in the FCT. The Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, conducted the exercise in Abaji, Bwari, Gwagwalada, Kuje, Kwali, and Abuja Municipal Area Council, that's AMAC. Now, this is the only council poll conducted by the Electoral Umpire, and it takes place every 3 years. INEC also conducts by-elections into vacant offices as the need arises. Now, INEC had published the final list of the contenders in the polls following the period for substitution and withdrawal of candidates as provided by the law. The names of 473 candidates sponsored by 14 political parties were approved. Of the figure, 110 candidates, that's chair and vice chair, vied for the leadership of the 6 area councils, while 363 candidates competed for 62 councillorship positions. The election led to the emergence of 6 chairpersons, 1 for each area council, and 62 councillors. Now, looking back at all that transpired during the FCT Municipal Polls, the question is, how prepared are the electorates, the political parties, and also the Electoral Umpire, that's INEC, for future elections? We're just about to find out from our guest, of course. He is Barr Festus Okoye, National Commissioner, Information and Voters Education, INEC. After this time out, please join us again.
Following the update of the electoral process in the FCT election, which held on the 12th of February 2022, Yaga Africa and the community of persons living with disability, through their findings, have expressed dissatisfaction over the electoral process from the opening and setup of the polling units, accreditation, voting, announcement and posting of the official results at the polling unit, and the result correlation process at the 6 area councils' result correlation centers. The findings of Yaga Africa includes the technological glitches with the Bimodal Voters Accreditation System, BVAS, voters' disenfranchisement, amongst others.
On Saturday, the area council election was fraught with shortcomings and infractions, which include the late deployment of election materials, poor distribution of PW assistive materials, uneven allocation of voters to polling units, and malfunctioning of the bimodal voter accreditation system. YAGA Africa considers this challenge a rollback in the quality of election day administration. We observe that the BVAS machine was deployed across all polling units. However, the usage of the BVAS was fraught with challenges, ranging from wrong configuration of the BVAS to respective polling units, the BVAS failing to accredit voters, delays in the RATEC response to BVAS complaints in polling units, as well as delays in authenticating voters within the processing time.
Also, the finding of the persons living with disability community include inaccessible to polling units and polling unit materials for PWs.
In terms of access, it was almost near to zero because we saw that polling units were presented over and across gutters. And some of them that they tried to present what looks like as access would have taken a long time for any persons with disability. Incidentally, Grace, who is on a wheelchair, could not access most of those polling units. We still observed that there were issues with the Braille. In fact, what they presented was laughable, sincerely, because that was not the Braille we know of and we expected them to present.
We observed that the Braille ballot guide was designed in a way that was impossible for blind voters to use effectively. We observed that while the ballot boxes was placed on flat surfaces for easy reach in most polling units, the height of the placement of in the other PUs was not suitable for voters with disabilities, especially those who use the wheelchair and those who use the roller blades. The Form EC40H was not available to collect data of voters with disabilities who voted on election day. At most polling units, the INEC Form EC30 EPWDs.
However, INEC was charged to conduct the proper audits of the BVAS machine, as it was stated that the issues surrounding the BVAS can be resolved.
If you just joined us, this is The Conversation. We are reaching you from Kaftan's television studio here in the nation's capital, Abuja. Now we have our guest, is Barr Festus Okoye. He is the National Commissioner of INEC. You're welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Great to have you. All right, now let's start with all that happened during the FCT polls. Now, personally, would you describe the just concluded FCT municipal election that took place last weekend? Can you authoritatively tell Nigerians that you were able to tick all the right boxes and deliver on the deliverables that you promised?
Well, as an electoral management body, we delivered on the election.
Okay.
But despite the fact that we delivered on the election, despite the fact that people enthusiastically embraced the outcome of the election, we still recognize the fact that there were problems, there were challenges, and there were issues in terms of our logistics and also in terms of the technology we deployed during the election. As you know, the area council election is the only local government election that the Independent National Electoral Commission conducts. And based on our appreciation of the centrality of the Federal Capital Territory, the Commission deployed 6 resident electoral commissioners to the 6 area councils, and also deployed 3 national commissioners to take care of 2 area councils each. So we made sure that we took the election seriously, and we did our best in terms of making sure that the credibility of the election was not questioned, but there were issues, there were challenges, and there were problems, and we acknowledge that.
Okay, so what other challenges did you face during the elections, especially how would you actually rate your performance during that election?
I think we performed very well. In terms of deployment, we moved all our materials, the sensitive election materials, from the central bank on Thursday. After we moved them, we made sure that representatives of all the political parties, civil society groups and organizations, and the media witnessed what we were doing. From the central bank, we moved these materials to our INEC state office, FCT office. From there, representatives of political parties and civil society groups and organizations accompanied these materials together with the beavers to the various local government areas. From the local government areas, these materials were also deployed to the super registration area centers and the registration area centers, from where they were deployed to the polling units at the first light on Saturday.
Okay.
Now, there were few issues and few challenges with the deployment to the polling units. Now, we do not deploy to the polling units without adequate security. In other words, each of the polling units must have the full complement of the security agencies that are going to work in that particular polling unit before we deploy. Now, but there were a few challenges in a few of the polling units. In a few of the polling units, the security agencies went to the polling units without the materials and without the ad hoc staff they were supposed to work with. So while the ad hoc staff were waiting for the security agencies at the super registration areas and the registration areas, some of the security agencies were already at their polling units.
Okay.
So that created some form of delay in some of the polling units. The second challenge we faced relates to the polling units themselves.
Okay.
As you are aware, we created, in the Federal Capital Territory, we have a total of 2,822 polling units. But in over 500 of these polling units, there were no registered voters. So we didn't print materials for those polling units, and we didn't deploy any ad hoc staff for those polling units. But we deployed materials and staff to every other polling unit, even if that particular polling unit has only one registered voter.
Okay.
But there were some polling units that had between 3,000 and 6,000 registered voters. So for every 3,000 registered voters, we deployed another additional beavers.
Okay.
But apparently there was high turnout, a voter turnout in some of those polling units. And before some of the ad hoc staff called for help, called for additional beavers, in some of them, the voters were already agitated. Now, some of the ad hoc staff apparently did not have adequate training or sufficient training, or some of them did not pay attention to the trainings they were given. And so the moment they encountered a few challenges, they just simply said, oh, the beavers is not working.
But you had ample time to train your staff. So what exactly happened?
No, we trained them. You know, people respond to training differently. And so while some of them did not have any challenges, some of them had challenges. But we also trained our registration area technical assistants and deployed them to the registration areas so that if there's any challenge, the ad hoc staff can call for help quickly to rectify whatever problems there are. some of them did call for help and they got help. Some of them did not call for help and thought that they could resolve the issues on their own. And when some of them could not resolve these issues quickly, there was agitation and there was anxiety in some of the polling units, especially where you had the high voter turnout, and also in some polling units where some people regarded as their stronghold. So that created its own anxiety, created its own problems. But as an electoral management body, we have taken all these problems on board. We've taken all these challenges on board, and we are doing what I call a comprehensive audit of the BVAS itself, and also doing a comprehensive audit of the type of training we've been given to this ad hoc staff. And one of the resolutions we have arrived at, because we had a meeting with all our resident electoral commissioners yesterday, and we also took reports from the 6 resident electoral commissioners that supervised the election in the 6 area councils. So we have agreed to do a comprehensive audit of the BVAS itself to determine whether there are a few things we need to change in the BVAS to make it faster, to also reduce the sensitivity of the fingerprint section, and also to make sure that the facials are captured, that it captures the facials on time. We're also looking at the training we give to ad hoc staff.
Okay.
So one of the resolutions we have arrived at is that we are going to begin the training of the core members who are doing their national youth service from now, whether there's any election or there's no election. So that by the time we get to the 2023 general election, we are going to have a pool of ad hoc staff, especially core members who are going to serve as presiding officers, who already are knowledgeable on the workings of the BVAS, so that we won't have any challenges of training. So that whatever training we are going to give them at the end of the day will just be refresher training to refresh their minds on what is going on. We have also agreed that we are going to produce electronic manuals that people can go through, and some protocols that they can go through and fully understand the workings of the BVAS.
Okay, so I'm going to take you from where you just landed off, and then you say the commission is actually going through some resolution, and then you're putting all of these complaints together.
Yes.
Some like some complaints that was gotten from some of the election observers and group was that INEC allocated voters to new polling units without prior information of these changes to the voters, and they also complained of the widespread malfunction of the BVAS, like you talked about, like such as inefficiency with changes ranging from a wrong configuration of the BVAS to the respective polling units, failure to accredit voters, delays in response to complaints in the polling units, as well as delays in authentication of voters within the processing time. So how would you explain all of this, even when you had days, weeks, months to prepare for this election? Why is it taking so much time to get this permanently sorted out? Because we thought that at least from the Anambra State elections, a lot of corrections should have been made.
Well, I'm just going to put the cards on the table without mincing words.
Okay.
Where we had weaknesses, I'm going to acknowledge those weaknesses. Where we had challenges, I'm going to acknowledge those challenges. Where there has been disinformation and misinformation, I will put it on the table. In terms of saying that the commission deliberately, maliciously, and without prior information allocated voters to polling units, that cannot be correct. And that is not correct. The newly created polling units, the people who did continuous voters registration exercise chose the polling units on their own. The registered voters, the old registered voters, we have not tampered with their polling units and where they normally vote. Okay. And that is why you see in the same premises, in the same school, a polling unit we have 3,000 registered voters, and another one we have just 1 registered voter, and another one we have just 10 registered voters. The implication is that we have not allocated any polling unit to any voter to any polling unit. What the Section 42 of the Electoral Act 2010 as amended gives us the power as an electoral management body to create polling units and allot voters to them. But we did not want to do that with the FCT area council elections in order not to confuse people in relation to where they normally vote, and also because enough sensitization had not been done, enough voter education has not been done in terms of moving people from their polling units to the newly created polling units. So going forward, since we are done with the area council elections, we have certain protocols on how we are going to allocate voters and move voters to these new polling units. So we are going to do what is called batch transfer to polling units. But we are not going to do these things arbitrarily. Okay. We are going to consult with traditional rulers in those communities. We are going to consult with the youth leaders. We are going to consult with religious leaders and so on and so forth. So that when we move people, they will know that we are moving them to polling units that are closer to them. The second challenge we had was that in some of the newly created polling units, some of the ministries, agencies, and departments and commissions where these new polling units are cited claim that they are not aware that there's a new polling unit in their premises. For instance, in some of the primary health centers, we created and cited some polling units in those places. When some of the ad hoc staff went to go and set up, they were not allowed to set up. So they had to return to the place from where the polling unit emerged.
Okay.
So that's one of the challenges we had on election day. But in terms of the functionality of the beavers, let me put it this way. The beavers as an authentication mechanism, as a mechanism for verification of voters, has come to stay. We are not going to back up from it. We are not going to go back on it, because we believe that it's a mechanism that will enable us to detect those who corrupt the electoral process. The beavers is an antidote to election rigging. It is the albatross to those who have been corrupting the electoral process, because those who have warehoused permanent voters' cards and have been using them and misusing them can no longer access the polling units with those permanent voters' cards. But we agree completely that there were challenges in some of the polling units in relation to the functionality of the beavers. We also agree that some of the ad hoc staff had challenges with operating the beavers. So these two issues, we are auditing them and we are putting them on the table as part of the problems we need to solve now, because we believe that it is urgent before we get to even the Ekiti governorship election that will take place on the 18th day of June 2022 and the Osun governorship election that will take place on the 16th of July 2022. So we want to address some of these issues now before we get to those elections.
But isn't that the same promises you made after the Anambra state elections? And a lot of people will say that the beavers is supposed to be an upgrade of the smart card reader, but yet you still have all of these problems. You either have the fingerprints not being recognized, or some people said you have to say cheese, like smile with all of your chin to chin. Why do you still have all of these complaints? Well,
on the issue of smiling, it's a security feature that was embedded in the beavers. But unfortunately, when we activate that security feature embedded in the beavers by asking people to smile, some people who were already angry because they have spent some time at the polling unit completely refused, and then it created his own problem. Secondly, the beavers needs some level of light in order to operate, and some of these ad hoc staff were trained on that, but some of them were trying to capture the facials in very dark places, and apparently it did not work until they were advised to move to a place where there is light, and then it started working and became faster. We are auditing all these things. Yes, we told Nigerians that we had learned valuable lessons from the Anambra governorship election. And you're also aware, I supervised the Anambra governorship election, and we had two elections in Anambra, the main election and the supplementary election in Ihiala. In Ihiala, we didn't have challenges with the beavers at all. So I think it was really, really surprising that some of the problems we had in the main election in Anambra related to the beavers reoccurred again during the FCT area council elections. And we are not glossing over it. And we are not shying away from it. We have acknowledged the fact that there were problems, there were challenges with the beavers in terms of its functionality and also in terms of those who were operating the beavers. And we are going back to the drawing board to take a comprehensive look at some of these issues and do an audit and see where the problems are. If it's a problem of the sensitivity of the beavers, we are going to address it. If it's a problem with the software itself, we are going to address it. Whatever challenges there are, we are definitely going to address it before we get to Ekiti and Osun governorship election.
Okay, so now you said that you don't know how the problems started, or with looking at the Anambra State election and what we have in the FCT area council, you don't know where the problem came from. But is it actually possible for maybe any of your ad hoc staff to manipulate the technology, the beavers? Because this is Nigeria, anything can happen. You can never say never.
No, for now it's not possible, because before, when we are using the smart card reader, the voter information and the data of the voters was embedded in a chip that is in the permanent voters card. With the beavers, the data relating to each registered voter is imputed and is domiciled in the beavers itself. Each beavers is configured to a particular polling unit. So if you remove the beavers from the polling unit where it's configured to a different polling unit, definitely it will not work, because the data of the registered voters in that polling unit is not domiciled in the beavers. So it's really next to impossibility for anybody to begin to talk of maybe manipulating the beavers. The beavers is configured by different people. It's configured in our office in the headquarters. And sometimes in the states before it's deployed. Okay. So the ad hoc staff are handed over to the beavers at the level of the refresher training a day before the election. Okay, but you said that it's not possible for the beavers to work in, they're supposed to, for a particular polling unit to work in another. Yes. But then you had the complaint that the election materials for, I think it was polling unit 36 was given to polling unit 37 in Gariki. How do you then explain that? If that happens, the implication is that they cannot vote because one, each polling unit has its own registered voters. Each polling unit has its own coordinates. Each polling unit is completely different. So if you carry materials meant for a particular polling unit to a different polling unit, there is no way it can work in that particular polling unit. It's next to impossibility. Unless, even if the polling units are sited in the same place, it cannot work. So you have to carry those materials and take to the polling unit, to the appropriate polling unit, before you can use them. Okay. All right. So the election observers also accused the Electoral Umpire of not putting its house in order as regards to early distribution of voters' material, which actually delayed the election process. As some said started at 10 a.m. while some started at 12 p.m. So I'm wondering, why does INEC always have that lateness every election? That's like a recurring complaint that you always get from the Electoral Umpire. Why do you always have that complaint? No, I've told you the trajectory of the distribution of election materials. Every non-sensitive election material moves sometimes 2 weeks, 3 weeks before any election, in terms of ballot boxes, in terms of cubicles, and also in terms of the other materials that are not really fundamental to the conduct of an election, that are not sensitive. These materials are already in the local governments. We deploy them to the local governments at least 2 weeks before any election. In terms of the sensitive election materials, the beavers, the ballot papers, and the result sheets, they leave the central bank on Thursday under heavy security. They go to the INEC state office or FCT office. Then from there, they move to the local governments, our offices in the local governments, the same Thursday. Then on Friday, these materials are segregated and distributed to the registration areas. So they move to the super racks and the ordinary racks on Friday. And then the ad hoc staff go and join these materials on that Friday. And they are trained, they are giving refresher training on Friday. Okay. Now, and these super racks are closer to the registration, to the polling units. The problem here is variegated. One, a core member or an ad hoc staff must know the exact location of his or her polling unit. 2, we have a memorandum of understanding with the National Union of Road Transport Workers and with the National Association of Road Transport Owners.
Okay.
But these people are not the owners of the vehicles. So we also have a written agreement with the transport owners to supply a certain number of vehicles. And these vehicles are inspected by the Federal Road Safety Commission, and the drivers are also profiled. So a driver must be at the registration area center at least by 6 a.m. in the morning. The security agencies that are to accompany that ad hoc staff must be at the registration area center at least by 6 a.m. in the morning.
Okay.
If the security agencies are not there, there's a high possibility that that ad hoc staff will not deploy, and there will be late opening of poll.
Okay.
So I told you that in this instance, some of the security officers went to the polling units directly without going to go and pick the ad hoc staff and the materials, since some of these materials are sensitive and we don't want them to be snatched on the way.
Okay.
So that created its own delay. Secondly, some of the ad hoc staff could not locate some of the newly created polling units on time. So we have resolved that since we have those we call RAUs, registration area officers, they are supposed to go and locate some of these newly created polling units and also interface with the ad hoc staff so that they will know where to go on election day. So that also created its own problems. So we are not really making excuses, but we know why some polling units did not open on time, and we are going to address all those issues. And let us also be very, very honest. Some of the vehicle owners, rather than some of them took things for granted. Some of them really didn't have fuel in their vehicles, and they collected our money. And then on election day, they just simply drove to the filling stations and didn't see fuel, and they started speaking grammar. So some of these things added to some of the problems we had. But we have received additional suggestions on how to obviate some of these problems, and we're evaluating all of them. We are going to also hold series of meetings with the National Union of Road Transport Workers and the National Association of Road Transport Owners, and also see in what ways we can also lease vehicle from some transport companies, so that if we have failure in one area, we can use our own plan B in order to obviate the challenges in another area.
Okay, I must say that I'm sure Nigerians are hopeful that we don't have to come back with these complaints again. At least you're putting the complaints together. So as we're looking forward to the Ekiti State governorship elections, I think there should be an upgrade. We shouldn't be complaining about this again.
Yes, the resident electoral commissioner for Ekiti State and the resident electoral commissioner for Osun State, we are at the meeting we had with our resident electoral commissioners yesterday. And in terms of those polling units that have 0 voters, we have made it very clear to them that we don't want to see any polling unit that has zero voters. So they have been given the mandate, they have been given the marching orders to go and populate those polling units together with community leaders and also together with the critical stakeholders, so that on election day, we don't want to see any polling unit with more than 1,000 registered voters. So they have been given marching orders. And we have also assured them that our own level as an electoral management body, as the policy makers, we are going to make sure that some of the problems that are associated with the beavers, and also some of the problems that are associated with the handlers of the beavers, does not reoccur. And then there were also some allegations that some of the trained ad hoc staff were replaced at the last moment. We're also looking into that particular allegation, because what we normally do is that if we require 12,000 ad hoc staff for a particular election, we normally train around 13,000, so that if some do not turn up, we can take from the pool of the reserve that have been trained in order to replace those that have not turned up. And that's exactly what we did. But we received complaints that some trained ad hoc staff were removed and some untrained ones were imputed. So it's part of the allegations we are investigating. And if we confirm that there was such an issue, definitely matters will arise, and whoever is involved will will be held to account.
So Nigerians should expect their heads will roll on this. Because it's like the typical Nigerian, things happen and you don't hear anything, no heads is rolling, no punishment or disciplinary measures taken.
No, in the commission, we make sure that if there's an allegation, we treat it as an allegation. If okay. we investigate and we find out that somebody has been involved in some infraction, we do not waste time in meting our punishment.
Okay.
And we do that without looking back. So we do in the commission, we don't engage in cover-up. Okay. If there's a problem, we deal with that particular problem. If there are issues, we deal with those issues.
Okay. We'll come back to that issue of cover-up. But let's talk about some candidates with or persons with disabilities, because some candidate like one Michael Mokumo, who is a candidate for APC, he said that he complained that some other people, they also complained that they were not given special attention as people with disabilities, and then some people said that there were no what do you call that, magnifying glasses, there were no special treatment for those with hearing impairments and all of that. So do you have these people in your plans, and what happened? Why does it feel like they were not included?
The Independent National Electoral Commission, as presently constituted, is the most inclusive organization in Nigeria. In terms of women, in terms of persons with disability, we are far, far ahead of so many organizations. All our ad hoc staff are trained and given the mandate to make sure that persons with disability, that pregnant women, that nursing mothers are given special treatment or preferential treatment at the polling units. So if you go to the polling units, you will see a situation where the moment 2 or 3 people vote, the presiding officer will see whether there's a pregnant woman on the queue, or whether there's somebody with disability on the queue, or whether there's a nursing mother on the queue, and they will begin giving preferential treatment.
Okay.
We emphasize that. In terms of deployment of assistive materials, we are still gathering data together with the organizations of persons with disability. The Albino Foundation are helping, Inclusive Friends are helping. It is only when we know where the people with disability are and the type of disability that is domiciled in a particular polling unit that we can deploy the requisite assistive device to assist people. So if we know that there are people with hearing impairment at a particular polling unit, we deploy to that particular polling unit. If there are people who have other impairments, we deploy. So we are gathering data. The moment somebody with a disability comes, the presiding officer pulls out a particular form and fills it and says, in this particular polling unit, somebody who has hearing impairment came to vote. So we have one person with hearing impairment. In this particular polling unit, somebody who suffers from albinism came to vote. So we need to put, in the next election, we need to deploy magnifying glass here. So we are gathering the data. The moment we finish gathering this particular data towards the 2019 2023 general election, we are definitely going to deploy better. So we are working with their various organizations. We are gathering the data and also gathering the data and giving us. So
does it mean that you didn't have them in your plans before now?
No. We do, but you know the number of registered voters keeps on increasing. People keep on moving, so there's a possibility that where we deployed one assistive, one magnifying glass before, there are 4 of them now. So we keep on gathering data and we keep on segregating this particular data in order to know where they are. It's not perfect yet, but we have been deploying.
Okay, so let's talk about voters' apathy. Now, looking at the numbers of, you had like 1.3 million registered voters, but yes, then roughly 10% that turned up for the election. So that obviously doesn't look good. So aside INEC's challenges, what other causes, or what are the other causes of this voters' apathy? Because this sing-song keeps occurring every election.
I think that other than the Independent National Electoral Commission, the media also has a responsibility to go and do a nationwide survey on this issue of voter apathy. Why are our people refusing to go to the polling units? The business of the Independent National Electoral Commission is to organize, undertake, and supervise elections. It is also a business to register voters, register political parties, and also carry out civic and political and voter education. And our civic and voter education is to comprehensively explain to our people the processes and procedures involved in elections and involved in voting. But the task of voter mobilization is the responsibility of political parties, is the responsibility of civil society groups and organizations, and also is the responsibility of the media. Why are our people not turning up, especially the elites like you? Because I believe that I'm not one of them. I'm closer to the masses than to the than to the elite. When you move to the rural areas, you see a high voter turnout. When you come to the main city center where the elites live, you will see that some of them are not even aware that we have area council elections. So why is that so? I believe that as an election management body, we have done our own bit, and we continue to do our own bit to increase voter access to the polling units. And that was why, after 26 years, we had to create additional polling units, bringing our polling units to over 176,000. And what we have done was to decongest existing polling units and then take the polling units closer to the people. By so doing, we have made it possible for the elderly to have polling units nearer to their houses, for pregnant women to have polling units nearer to their houses, for nursing mothers who normally carry their cooking utensils to the polling units to go and cook because they have to take care of their children. We've taken the polling units closer to them. So by so doing, we are also doing our own bit. We have also given some level of credibility to the electoral process. Most Nigerians now believe that they can go to the polling units and vote, and their votes will count. And when people believe that they can go to the polling units and vote and their votes will count, they will definitely go there. And you can see, and when we declare the results of the area council elections in terms of chairmanship and councilorships, you can see the excitement, you can see the jubilation all over the place. Nobody, as of today, has accused the Independent National Electoral Commission of having manipulated any of those results or having not declared the correct results, because we also have our own INEC result viewing portal through where we upload the polling unit results in real time so that Nigerians can follow what is going on at the polling units. Okay. But fundamentally, one, if people believe that if they go and vote, their votes will not count, there's a possibility that they will keep them away from the polling units. Secondly, no Nigerian will want to go and vote and die. So if people believe that they can go to the polling units and not come back alive, or that they can go to the polling units and come back with broken heads on account of the fact that some candidates from some political parties have deployed thugs to go and unleash mayhem at the polling units, they're likely going to keep away. Some people may likely keep away if the polling units are too far from them. Some people may also keep away from the polling units if they believe that government has not worked for them. So if politicians or candidates promise people good roads, pipe-borne water, good hospitals and drugs in the hospitals, and then at the end of 4 years, they can't see anything, there's a possibility that they may see government as very, very far from them and they completely keep away. If the politicians also do not go to mobilize people and explain to the people their programs and policies and also their ideological bent, there's a possibility that people may just keep away from the polling units. But we have created an enabling environment for people to have confidence. And that is why, since we recognize the fact that the youth population of Nigeria is increasing and that there's enthusiasm among the young people for them to register, we created an online pre-registration portal through which they can begin their registration before going to the state offices and local government offices to go and capture their biometrics. We had a meeting yesterday. We are now deploying the voters registration down to the registration areas or to the wards. So we are going to engage in a rotational, put in a rotational schedule by which we'll be moving from one ward to the other, from one registration area to the other, to bring these things closer to the people. So we are doing our own bit. Let the politicians also engage in voter mobilization. Let them do their own bit. Let the civil society groups and organizations do their own bit. Let them compete on the social media. We're also trying to compete on the social media in terms of civic and voter education. So we are doing our own bit, and then we also expect Nigerians to do their own bit. The issue of giving value to the vote is the responsibility of every Nigerian. Making sure that our votes count is the responsibility of Nigerians, and also being good citizens is also our responsibility. We need to guarantee our future and also the future of our children, and that is why people go out to go and vote, in order to make sure that we get good leaders.
Okay. All right, let's go on a quick break, and when we return, we'll continue with this conversation with Barrister Festus Okoye. I'll see you shortly. So do you think that INEC has sufficient time to implement the provisions of the bill, even as we look forward to the next elections?
Well, for the Independent National Electoral Commission, the chairman of the commission has made it very clear that we need some level of certainty in terms of the electoral legal framework that will be used for the 2023 election, and that there should be some speed in terms of resolving whatever challenges there are. And I'll tell you why.
Okay.
The bill that is with the president as of today has completely and fundamentally altered the timelines for the doing of so many things within the electoral legal framework. One,
glad to have you back. If you just joined us, this is The Conversation. We are reaching you from Kaftan's television studio here in the nation's capital, Abuja. Now, we still have Barrister Festus Okoye, and we're talking about the FCT Area Council elections that took place last weekend. So we've talked about a lot of things about all that happened and how much the INEC, the Electoral Umpire, is putting things together to ensure that at least we get credible elections, even as we look forward to future elections. Now let's divert a little bit. Aside being the INEC commissioner, national commissioner, I know that you're also a barrister. So concerning the reworked electoral bill that has undergone so much adjustment by the National Assembly, are we actually going the right way, knowing that INEC is in charge of elections? So explain to us, why is it the National Assembly that has to amend the bill now, having so much rework on the bill?
Well, constitutionally and legally speaking, the task of lawmaking, making law for the peace and the good government of the Federation, is the exclusive responsibility of the National Assembly, especially when an issue is in what we call the exclusive legislative list. Now, when the National Assembly is done, then they will pass the bill to the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria for his assent. And the President has a total of 30 days to either assent to a particular bill or to withhold his assent. And that was what happened during the first time the bill was sent to him. Now, the National Assembly opened its own process and was transparent in the management of this particular process. What happened was that both the Senate Committee on INEC and the House of Representatives Committee on Electoral Matters worked together jointly for the first time. And that was why there was some level of speed in terms of the output. Now, both organized what we call public hearings.
Okay.
The electoral management body, civil society groups and organizations, the media, and the different stakeholders went and made proposals and suggestions and recommendations on what they believe should go into a new electoral legal framework. The commission also did. During the technical committee session organized by both houses, the Independent National Electoral Commission was also part of that technical process. In fact, both committees, that's the Senate Committee on INEC and the House Committee on Electoral Matters, gave me the privilege of chairing the technical session. It was at the end of that particular technical session that the two committees now submitted their report to the plenary, to the National Assembly, that has the ultimate right, the exclusive right, really, to make laws for the Federal Republic of Nigeria, because that is their constitutional remit, and that is what they are asked to do by the Constitution. So, what happens is that when they are done with making the laws, and it is signed by the president, it becomes a law of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Then both the Constitution itself and the Electoral Act also gives the Independent National Electoral Commission the power to make subsidiary legislation in terms of our regulations, in terms of our gazettes and our manuals, and in terms of our guidelines. Some of these things are gazetted, so it follows the law. So our gazettes also have the force of law, but the main law still remains the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and the Electoral Act, followed by our gazettes and our manuals and our guidelines. What is going on is the normal way of lawmaking, and there's nothing strange about it.
Okay, so do you think that INEC has sufficient time to implement the provisions of the bill, even as we look forward to the next elections?
Well, for the Independent National Electoral Commission, the chairman of the commission has made it very clear that we need some level of certainty in terms of the electoral legal framework that will be used for the 2023 election, and that there should be some speed in terms of resolving whatever challenges there are. And I'll tell you why.
Okay.
The bill that is with the president as of today has completely and fundamentally altered the timelines for the doing of so many things within the electoral legal framework. One, the new bill makes it mandatory for the government to release the funds required for the conduct of election 12 months before the election itself. That's 360 days before the election. Secondly, the new bill makes it mandatory that the Independent National Electoral Commission shall give the notice for the conduct of election 360 days before the election. And as you are aware, the commission has already fixed the 12th day of February 2023 as the date for the conduct of the presidential election. So if the president does not sign the bill this month, and it dovetails to next month, the implication is that we will be caught up by the 360 days required for us to give the notice for the conduct of election.
Okay.
And that is a problem. That's one. Secondly, in the new bill, political parties are supposed to submit the list and personal particulars of their nominated candidates to the Independent National Electoral Commission 180 days before election. And if you calculate it, it gives you around August. So the implication is that political parties must conduct their party primaries in order to still be within the legal frame, the legal period for the submission of the particulars of their nominated candidates around June or July. And presently, we have not released the timetable and schedule of activities for all these activities, and we need to release that as quickly as possible, so that all the people preparing for elections will prepare with some level of timelines, with some level of certainty, and because we don't want anything to be done arbitrarily or through discretion.
Okay.
So it is our hope that there should be a quick resolution of the issues around the new electoral legal framework, so that we can begin to plan ahead, so that we can begin to prepare well, because we want to conduct a very professional election, and we want to conduct an election that all Nigerians will be proud of, and we need some level of certainty in relation to the new electoral legal framework going forward.
Okay, so judge it from your registered voters and the turnout. How prepared would you say that the electorates are, even as we look forward to the Ekiti state governorship elections and the Osun state, and then the general elections? What changes is INEC bringing to the table that is different from what Nigerians have heard or seen?
Well, you know, there are so many Nigerians that are now on the social media. So our voter education initiatives has been completely altered. And we are looking at more creative and more innovative approaches to civic and voter education. Before, we print posters, do banners, do handbills, do road shows, do town hall meetings, and so on. But we are still in a pandemic, and we can no longer do things the old way. So we are looking for more creative, more innovative approaches to civic and voter education. So we are also competing very intensely on social media, because so many of our youth are on social media. We're also looking at other using both also the conventional media or the orthodox media, the print, the electronic media, and the radio and television in order for us to increase awareness in relation to elections. In Ekiti and Osun State, of course, the people know that there's an election because party primaries are already have either been completed or have been completed in Ekiti, and party primaries, I think, we start today in Osun. So people know that election is imminent. So as an electoral management body, we want to do our own bit to make sure that we don't have spoiled ballots, and that people know what their responsibilities are in relation to the election. We also want to make sure that we train our ad hoc staff and train them well, so that they understand their responsibilities in relation to the election. So we are bringing so many things on board. If you understand, as of today, political parties no longer come to the premises of the Independent National Electoral Commission to come and fight, in terms of factionalization and also in terms of different interests within a political party. Because the moment they conclude their party primaries, we give an access code to our party nomination portal to the national chairman of the party, and they use that access code to upload the results, to upload the list and personal particulars of their validly nominated candidate to our portal.
Okay.
And the moment the dates and the time we gave for the uploading of that particular list and personal particulars elapses, the portal shuts down, and there's no two-way to it. So they have been complying, and we don't have fights in the premises of the commission anymore. The same thing with civil society groups and the media. They apply for accreditation electronically, and we accredit them electronically. The party agents, or the ones we call pool agents, the political parties also upload their own list to our nomination portal. So you now see a situation where you have a name, you have a photograph, and you have an address of a polling agent or a party agent. So when there's an infraction, when there's a problem, when there's a challenge, we know who is where. So we have introduced all these measures to bring some level of order and some level of credibility to the electoral process. But we still acknowledge that there's still so much to be done. But we have the courage to do that. Okay. And we also have the courage to admit that we are not where we are, where we are supposed to be, or where we want to be. We don't want to lower the bar. We want the bar to keep on going up. And that is our aim. We want to take our electoral process to such a stage that a national commissioner, a resident electoral commissioner, an electoral officer cannot, by any means whatsoever, influence the result of any election. And that is where we want to take our electoral process to. Okay. We want this particular commission to run as a truly independent national electoral management body that does not revolve solely around the individuals, but revolves around the integrity of the institution, around the professionalism of those working in the institution, and also around the processes and procedures that have been put in place by the institution itself.
Okay, so very quickly, even as we begin to round up, you talked about disciplinary measures, that your commission does not joke with punitive measures. Anyone that errs, the person is punished. Now, how about past election offenders that up until now, another election has come, another election is coming, they've not yet been brought to book? What is your commission doing in that regard? So many electoral offenders have been brought to book. But you must recognize that there are also issues with that. Now, the Independent National Electoral Commission does not have its own police force. So we rely on the security agencies for purposes of arrest.
The Independent National Electoral Commission does not carry out investigation of criminal offenses. So we also rely on the security agencies to carry out investigation. It is when arrests have been made and investigation has been completed that sometimes the files are handed over to Independent National Electoral Commission for purposes of prosecution. And we have been prosecuting electoral offenders. But we have said that as a people and as a nation, we must break the cycle of electoral impunity. And we have canvassed and we continue to canvass that this country needs a completely different commission or a completely different agency to handle the arrest, investigation, and prosecution of electoral offenders. Because the commission is too busy with organizing, undertaking, and supervising elections. And the issue of prosecuting of electoral offenders is more or less like a distraction. But we recognize that it is a big issue, and that unless people are punished and people are seen to have been punished, those who engage in electoral fraud, those who engage in manipulating the electoral process, and those who do not wish our electoral process well, we continue to engage in electoral malpractices and electoral infraction. So let the National Assembly complete work on a new framework for the arrest, investigation, and prosecution of electoral offenders, and the commission will be too happy to cede that particular power to that particular commission.
Okay, so now we are, INEC is ready, come Ekiti. That's the next election, Ekiti 2022. Is that the next election, or you haven't?
We have, you see, that's the issue. Our elections have been completely and irreversibly staggered. On the 26th of this month, of February, we have a federal constituency election for Ugoja Yala Federal Constituency. On the same day, we have election in Jos North Basa Federal Constituency. We also have election in Akure North, Akure South Federal Constituency. The same day, we have election in Panshin State Constituency of Plateau State. We also have an election in Apabuyo, a state constituency of Cross River. And we also have an election in Ngopala, a state constituency of Imo State, on the 26th, before we get to the Ekiti and Osun governorship election. And we also have 3 state assembly elections outstanding. 2 in Zamfara that we have not fixed on grounds of security issues. We are still discussing with the security agencies in relation to that. And we also have one in Giwa State constituency of Kaduna State that we have not fixed. Okay, so we are ready. INEC is ready for all of these elections. Oh, definitely, yes. Oh, great. I'm sure that's all Nigerians want to hear. Thank you so much for your time with us, Barrister Festus Okoye. It's always a pleasure having this talk with you. I think you for always making our time to come. Thank you. All right, we have been chatting with Barrister Festus Okoye. He's the National Commissioner of INEC, and it's been a wonderful time here on The Conversation. I will see you next time. From the nation's capital, Abuja, I am Annabelle Oji. God bless Nigeria.